Chapter 6 of this book by J.A. Wylie, The Training of the Jesuits, Our Father in Heaven. Open our eyes to see the snares of the enemy. Open our ears to hear the rumblings of Satan. I pray, Father, that your people will be ready in the name of your Son, through your Son, Jesus Christ. Amen. Chapter 6. The bull of the Pope, after all, could effect but little. It could add another order to those already at the service of Rome. But that was nearly all it could do. Beyond the score or so men who now stood before Paul III, the order was yet to create. The genius and enthusiasm of Loyola alone could do this. These few individuals he would multiply into an army of thousands, and he would breathe into them such a spirit as was demanded that at the hour by the perils, and we may add, the despair of the papacy, Loyola would have no half-hearted and timorous soldiers in his army. Every offered recruit he would pass through the fire of a terrible ordeal, and only on finding that he stood the test would he enroll him in the ranks of a host as yet undistinguished but destined to achieve in due time a name that would fill all lands with its terror. The age was one of the great mental and moral daring, uplifted by great principles and enlarged by sublime aims, and with great question in debate. Men on both sides were girding themselves for toil and suffering, and even for the most horrible deaths. They made light of dungeons and racks when they stood between them and the object to which they had devoted themselves. Loyola and his company knew their age, and they resolved to meet its spirit with a spirit of equal devotion and heroism. The work to which the Jesuits were called was beyond measure difficult. They must do what Charles V had failed to do with all his armies and executioners. But in proportion to the difficulty of the work, so must be the length and severity of the preparation for it, and so too the glory of its achievement. The Jesuits needed a threefold preparation. They must be disciplined in body, disciplined in mind, and disciplined in soul. They must undergo a physical training, an intellectual training, and a spiritual training. Let us bestow a glance at each of these. They had to be trained in body. On a physical frame, wiry, hardy, and capable of great endurance must be grafted their qualities of mind and soul. They would have to do the errands of Rome in all climates and under all outward conditions. They would be required to serve her in hunger and thirst, in cold and nakedness, amid the ice of the pool and under the burning sun of the tropics. This was no service for the sons of luxury. It was no service in truth for anyone till first he was master of a body hardened and braced by proper training. Loyola had undergone such training in his own person, and the servant in this respect must be as his master. Long fastings must teach him to endure hunger. The gnawings of the iron girdle or the frettings of the hair's shirt must teach him to despise pain, and exposure to all weathers must brave him to do battle with the hail and lightnings of the sky, the crested surges of the deep, or the sands of the burning desert. To all these endurances did Loyola inure his disciples, the warriors who followed Alexander into the then unknown regions of India, and the soldiers who marched at the command of Napoleon to the frost and drifts of a northern winter were brave men and thoroughly disciplined. But they were not drilled and hardened to the pitch of Loyola's army. The phalanxes of the Macedonian and the legions of the Corsican would have shrunk from task and turned back before dangers against which The troops of Loyola advanced with an unshrinking firmness and a never-failing courage. Loyola trained his followers intellectually and socially. He taught them to be willing to serve Rome in all conditions of life, in honor and in dishonor, in good report and in bad report, and to accept with equal readiness the most splendid post or the most despised position, which the interest of the church might require them to fill. Their vocation, he reminded them, was more truly grand than that of any other of the servants of the papal chair. Its importance must be its reward meanwhile. Its solid and enduring recompense would come hereafter. They must acquire a knowledge of all trades and handicrafts. They must study sciences and arts. They must speak all languages. We do not mean that this vast range of accomplishment and capability was exacted on the part of each individual Jesuit, but only on the part of the order. It must be in itself an epitome of society. The order must be able to send forth men for all departments of life, for the plow, for the loom, for the factory, for the bourse, for the school, for the bench of justice, for the army, and for the church. Its members must wear an infinity of shapes, play an infinity of parts, and disperse themselves so widely among professional pursuits as to make it impossible to be believed that they were all moving on one point and all obeying one head. Some were to counsel kings, others were to guide the consciences of ministers of state, others to lead armies, others to declaim in parliaments, and others to harangue at country fairs. They were to preach all theologies, Lutheranism, Calvinism, Arminianism, Anabaptism. They were to be Mohammedan dervishes, Indian fakers, and Chinese pundits. By these counterfeits, they would open their way into all circles, into all countries, and be able to mold and guide opinion, and yet the quarter from which the inspiration came should not be known. Their mission, in which all their efforts were made to concentrate, was to quench the liberties of the new age, corrupt the churches of the Reformed faith, undermine the thrones of disobedient kings, convulse non-Catholic nations. In short, to break down the world, having broken it down, to build it up again and assume the government of it. What an insight, powerful, and it's still applicable and could be seen in our world today. May God our Father bless you in His only begotten divine